We'll get to the refs in a moment because I do believe they deserve some of the blame for what was a bad performance last night. But I am also not going to come on here, nor do I really ever, and say, oh, you start with bad calls. You start with the litany of other things the reasons that Utah lost this game. We already pinned it number one. Kyle Whittingham's just blindness in some ways in order to see the bigger picture, his narrow-minded focused on, I need a touchdown. I don't care. Like 4th and 7, we're going to get it. Grit, we'll go for it. Like all of that is part of the reason that Utah lost. Outside of that, the next couple of reasons. How about the passing game being absolutely abysmal? I literally think we'll dive into that probably more on another show. That's on Jason Beck. It's on Dampier, and it's on the pass catchers. All of them to me. The bad tackling was brutal too. How about the self-inflicted mistakes as well? You're talking about things like late in the game. You're talking about a 12 men on the field penalty. Are you kidding me? In that big and that key of a spot too. You got some false start penalties that really hurt you as well, and some pass interference penalties where it's like, what are you guys doing out there? And there's just a lot of reasons that you can list of why Utah lost this game, Bryce.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And look, I don't know which one was the most egregious. I just know that the fact that Witt had to go to the referee and tell him at the beginning of the second half and be like, that's 6 penalties that you've called against us to 0. Mm-hmm. And they caught him on the broadcast yelling at the referee, reading his lips, saying that's 0 that you've called on BYU. I think that kind of put it in their minds. A lot of times I call basketball games, and a lot of times when coaches get teed up, you start to see the foul count start to shift towards that team with the coach that got teed up. It changes the game. And I think that's what Witt was trying to do a little bit there. And you started to see a lot more pass interference calls and other things called against BYU late in the game. But I would agree. It was kind of a strange situation. I also believe, though, JT, that goes back to coaching. I think that the fact that Utah had so many penalties on them, that's another aspect of coaching this football team. You have to know going into the game that BYU and their wide receivers are 15th in the nation at drawing pass interference and holding calls down the field. That's because they have athletes on the outside and they play that style of game. You have to coach them up better on the back end of the defense to not have those penalties happen. And I think this goes back to coaching. It's the same story, JT.
I agree. It's things like, let's send both linebackers on a blitz on Bear because we want to frustrate him to make a decision on 3rd and 10 late in the game. And Bear's like, oh, I'm going to run. And then you literally leave. Unfortunately, this is just true. Teo Johnson, who's your worst tackling player on this football team right now. He just is. I'm sorry. He had 2 brutal missed tackles in this game for Utah outside of, and there was a couple other ones too, but you send both the linebackers on a blitz there, and that puts you in a really tough spot. I do believe, though, like I said, when we're assigning blame, if you want to say, hey, the refs were bad, I think that's fair because, my gosh, Bryce, the amount of times that John Henry Daly was held in this game, I thought was absolutely out of control. And even on things like when Lander ended up hitting Bear on that one, you see they're all over him there. I thought there could have been way more holding calls there. I thought BYU got away with some stuff after the whistle. And I understand the Cougars are going to go, hey, well, guys got away with a thing or two as well. That's fair. But I do feel like, it was 12-7, and I do totally agree with what you mentioned in terms of like Utah had this is where self-inflicted mistakes. Utah was being not as well coached, like they were committing dumber penalties. Utah should have had more penalties than BYU in this game. But I do believe there were absolutely some bad missed calls in this game that really hurt Utah. And if I'm Kyle Whittingham and I am Utah, I want to send some of those into the Big 12 and be like, hey, what's the reasoning explanation on some of this stuff? Because it was such a slant. I want to know why there weren't at least a few more holding calls or non-holding calls in a couple of instances on some of the BYU offensive linemen and DBs.
Sure, and that's all fair. I just think back to the Jackson Benny interception, and you look once again, and I believe it was Teo Johnson that had the holding on Carson Ryan, and that's such a huge penalty. You just can't have it. There's no reason you should even be holding Carson Ryan in that situation. It's not like he had massive separation or he was going to be able to get even further away from you. Just don't hold him. And that's another thing that comes down to coaching. And that's such a big interception when BYU's driving down the field in that time that would have changed the entire momentum, but it got taken away and wiped off the board.
It was massive, and the tackling issues with this team are maddening. Credit BYU for sticking to the run game, LJ Martin, all of that. But things there, and there were multiple guys that missed tackles, right? Defensive linemen, linebackers, everything. But we're not trying to pick on the guy. But Teo Johnson, like if he comes up with that sack, and Lander Barton can remain in the game, it's everything. Because then, Bryce, I go back once again to that third down, 3rd and 10, Bear takes off and runs. That's Teo again, who misses that call. And it was one. And Demooney missed a couple of big tackles in this game too, coming in, because it's hard to play when you haven't been on the field as much. Sometimes fresh legs help, but the other time, like, you're not in the flow, the rhythm of it. And a lot of things are happening. So it was just the tackling issues. It's really unfortunate to see a Morgan Scally team struggling with tackling as much as this Utah team is.
Well, and the other thing that I want to bring up is that Blinder Barton call is so big because on the broadcast, they pointed this out. BYU was attacking the middle. They were running between the tackles every single time. And they showed the yardage difference on the outsides, like 6 yards to the left and like 14 yards to the right. And it was all up the middle. The majority, like 80-90% of the yardage on the ground was all up the middle, whether they give it to LJ Martin or run it with Bear Bachmeier. And you lose your man in the middle, and it changes the entire rest of the game. So it was such a big call and such a big portion of that game. I just thought that's what you look back at and you think, if you could just do something a little bit better, play more disciplined football. And is that something we've ever heard about saying about a Kyle Whittingham coach team? Never. I think they played outside of their minds because they wanted to be BYU so bad. I think that's what it was. You're right on with that, JT.
To outgain them by 100 yards and lose this game and have more first downs and so many things is so disappointing when you look back on how it all turned about, how we got to the results that we did too. And I'll also just say this is the type of game that in some ways you lost this game because of other things, but in some ways you also lost this game in the offseason because you lost some key defensive tackles to the transfer portal and you didn't replace them. And you have guys like Jonah Lae out there, and I really like him as a pass rusher, and at times he could do some nice things. Bryce, he got tossed off the ball a couple of times by BYU's offensive line. I'm talking like he's pushed 5 yards down the field, and that's part of the reason that teams have so much success, at least last night, and we've seen it a couple of times, running in between the tackles on Utah right now, is the hulking defensive tackles are not there like they used to be with this team. Utah should have added more in the offseason, and we see in a game like this, their decision not to, because of how thin they are in that room, really hurt them yesterday.
Yeah, no doubt about it. You lose a big guy in the middle, and then you don't go out and find anybody to replace him that can step up and meet the challenge. And I thought, even on our show, I talked about it all weekend or all week long there on ESPN, the Fan, running it right up the middle because that's a little bit more of a soft spot on that Utah defensive line, and it showed big time against BYU last night.
Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if yours wins. That's right. Pick up a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love FanDuel because it gives you so many different ways to play. You can build parlays, player props, and even follow the live lines during the games. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. There's a great NFL slate coming up and college football around the corner. Utah is going to be a big favorite against a struggling Colorado team, and I feel good about Utah bouncing back. But however you're feeling, make sure you head over to FanDuel Sportsbook today.